Okay, cool. So, hi everyone. Uh, Today it's gonna be like less of a book club, obviously, more of like a seminar slash topic discussion, and we're gonna be focusing. It's gonna be just very like introductory, the type of stuff you would find in a undergrad philosophy of mind course, but just going over some of the key positions and views in philosophy of mind about what the nature of reality kind of is, what everything boils down to. And then in the second half, I guess, I'll talk a little bit about Nagel's book that came out like ten or so years ago that was received pretty unfavorably in the academic world, but it was trying to make a case against physicalism and against what he thought to be the consensus in scientific thought. But this presentation is just going to be about physicalism, some of the key terms, panpsychism, monism, all that type of stuff. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So, for those of you who might not know, the key terms that you'll need when discussing mind and the nature of reality would be these here. Physicalism is essentially the idea. This is a very like, crude definition, but it's essentially the idea that everything in the world or in the universe is physical, or at the very least depends on the physical. So your emotions, your beliefs, your values, your thoughts, the future, the past, all that type of stuff either completely depends on the physical or simply is physical. Some sort of neural firing in the brain. Dualism, on the other hand, you guys might be familiar with. This was what made Descartes kind of famous. It's the idea that there are two distinct building blocks to the nature of reality, and these are physical things like like this cup in front of me, and then mental things, thoughts, belief, souls, and the mental and the physical are two entirely separate and fundamentally distinct entities or building blocks of the universe. Another term is that of supervenience. So it's the idea that there is no mental difference without a physical difference. So there cannot be a different mental state if the physical state that it assumes itself on um, is different. So, for example, let's say like the idea of fear. So fear, or let's say pain. Pain's a better example. So pain, for example, there is no different like feeling of pain if there is no different physical neural firings in the nervous system of this type of this pain or of this input. And then another one is of qualia, which you guys have probably also maybe heard of, and it's this very subjective, phenomenally charged first-person character of experience. It's like, why is my blue blue? How do I know my blue is your blue? It's the way we see things from a very personal and subjective lens. And so physicalism, it comes in two flavors, I guess, or in two types. In that of reductive physicalism, also called identity theory, and then that of non-reductive physicalism, or also called supervenience. There's more ways of defining physicalism and stuff like that, but I guess I didn't have enough time or attention to go through all of them. But the first one, reductive physicalism, is the idea that there is this one-to-one relationship between all mental states and all physical states, or brain states, I guess. So all pain is the C fiber activation in the brain. That was a discovery that came along like a long time ago. It's whenever we saw a certain fiber activating, people responded or people reported to have this pain feeling. So what reductive physicalism is saying is that these two things are identical. They're exactly the same. Pain is the same thing as some sort of neural firing in the brain. Non-reductive physicalists, they don't go to that extreme. They don't go that far. But they still believe that everything is physical. They only believe, the only difference is that they believe that the mental depends. There's a dependency on the physical. So not perfectly identical to it, merely depending on it. It's kind of in the same way that a cake, take like a cake for instance, it depends on all of its like ingredients, right? So it depends on it having eggs and flour and milk and all that type of stuff. but the cake itself is not exactly eggs, milk, flour. It's like something else. It turned into something else. And that's what the non-reductive physicalist is saying. That's what supervenience is kind of saying. That mental states depend on the physical but are not identical to them. And so, reductive physicalism, to flesh it out a little bit more, is just saying that all mental phenomena can be fully explained, completely understood by physics, chemistry, neuroscience, and all that type of stuff. And this is the type of physicalism that Thomas Nagel, in this book that we'll be talking about in a bit, this is the type of physicalism he's attacking, and he thinks everyone in the scientific community and everyone in the philosophical community takes for granted. So reductive physicalism, it's basically saying that mental experiences are identical to the physical ones. We can understand them fully in physical terms. Non-reductive physicalism, though, this is, I think, a more popular one in philosophy of mind. But this is the idea that while mental states depend on physical states, they are not completely reducible to them. So a common example, other than the cake example I kind of just gave, is that of these pointillist paintings. So there's this type of art style where instead of making brush strokes, you kind of like just make a bunch of little points, and then all of these points together, if you zoom out, they make an image. And so the idea behind this analogy is that this painting, the image of the dog and the people sitting around on this grass field, they all depend on the individual points that make up this image, but they are not identical to the individual points that make up this image. And in the same way, psychological properties that we have, they emerge from physical states in the brain, but they're not purely identical to them. They supervene, they come above and over. So in that way, beliefs, desires, thoughts, feelings, all these like complicated mental phenomena, they're not fully described by neuroscience alone. They're like of a higher order. So they accept physicalism in the sense that everything is ultimately physical, but they argue that higher level mental concepts like feelings, beliefs, desires, and so on supervene above the physical. They depend on the physical, but they are not identical to the physical, and that's this non-reductive type of physicalism. And so moving even further away from the radical reductive physicalists, we have the functionalists, and they understand mental states as something, as merely a role or a causal function within a system. So when we're trying to understand what something is, we should understand it purely in terms of the information that's fed to it, the internal state that it must possess, and then the output it gives. And this allows for a lot of objections to physicalism, right? That of multiple realizability. So if we go back, I guess this might be like if we go back a tiny bit. Here, for instance, the reductive physicalists might say that pain is the same thing as firing C fibers, right? So what pain is certain neural firings in the brain. A common objection to the reductive physicalists when they're making this type of example or making this type of claim is, well, what about octopuses or octopi? They do not have these C fibers, but presumably they can feel pain, right? In the same way an alien, if he were to come down to Earth, he has a totally different nervous system. He might be made up of silicon or something like that, but it's still able to feel pain. And that's this issue of multiple realizability. It's like one mental state can be realized in lots of different physical forms. And that's what the functionalist is trying to accommodate for. It's saying, well, pain might not necessarily be this one-to-one representation of C fires activating in the human body. What it might be is just a functional role that system can afford it. And so that's how functionalism is accommodating this objection. The next one, a very common one, or at least a very popular one, is that of dualism. So it's saying that it's not all just physical. This is on the other end of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have reductive physicalists, and then on the other one, you have dualists, and then in between, you have all these other types of theories of of mind or of reality. Substance dualism is kind of on this end. It says, well, there's not everything is physical, flat out, flat-footed. There are mental features to the world and physical features to the world. Both of them are perfectly distinct. And the issue with a lot of dualists is, well, how do these things interact? When I have a feeling of fear and it makes me want to run away, how is that mental part of fear interacting with the physical fact of my legs moving and running away? Where's the interaction going on there? And that was this issue that a lot of people pointed out, specifically Elizabeth of Bohemia or something like that. Elizabeth, I don't know, whoever Descartes was talking to at the time, but she kind of raised that objection, and it's been ongoing since. But that's this physical dualism. Property dualism is a little bit different. It's saying that there is one substance and then two irreducible types of properties that substance has. And I can't really think of a good example or an analogy to this, but it's like saying it's not just like a physical unit, it's not just like a mental unit, like the substance dualists might say, oh, there's these two competing units, but it's really just one unit with two types of properties, with two things it can do. I guess one example could be like your phone is one entity, and it can either take photos or receive phone calls. It has like two properties or two functions almost, and that's what these property dualists are saying, that we are comprised of this substance that has two irreducible properties. Then there is that of epiphenomenalism, which is related to this type of dualism, and it says that mental states caused by physical states, mental states are caused by physical states, but they have no causal power. So that's different than the supervenient physicalists, which says they do have mental power, but they are distinct. And then finally, these are like the more fun types of theories that there are out there, or funner models that I only came to learn about like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But that's of panpsychism and then of neutral monism. This neutral monism here, this is what Thomas Nagel, this is what he's kind of arguing for in his book Mind and Cosmos. But first, let's look at panpsychism. Panpsychism is the idea, it kind of flips physicalism on its head, where the physicalist says what's fundamental to everything is physical stuff. The panpsychist says, no, it's maybe conscious stuff or proto-experience that's fundamental, that comes first. And then the neutral monist says it doesn't make as far-reaching claims as the panpsychist, but it says that everything in the world, whether it be mental or physical, comes from one basic unit, one neutral thing. But it's a bit vague as to what that thing is. So the panpsychist will say that consciousness is fundamental to all matter. So to some extent, there is proto-consciousness in this mouse in front of me, proto-consciousness in that rock outside, that consciousness is the fundamental unit of reality, as opposed to physical stuff being the fundamental unit of reality. And it was motivated by the hard problem of consciousness that you guys are probably familiar with. And it comes in two flavors, micropsychism and then cosmopsychism. So micropsychism is the idea that simple consciousness at the smallest scale is combined in complex systems. So every particle in the universe has some sort of consciousness to it. A very, very small or prototype of experience, but it has some sort of consciousness to it. And then cosmopsychism is the idea that the universe itself is consciousness. We are just one part of this consciousness. We make up a small percentage of the universal consciousness that there is. And so these are pretty far out claims. Not the most popular, but fun to entertain and fun to think about. Then there is this neutral monism, the one that Nagel is kind of advocating for in the face of the Neo-Darwinian arguments that he's kind of dealing with in the book that we'll talk about in a second. But it's the idea that the mental and the physical are two aspects of a more fundamental neutral substance. It kind of goes along the lines of reasoning that the property dualist has. that there is one unit, one essential unit to the universe that comprises everything, and that it has a mental aspect to it, possibly, and a physical aspect to it. And the way it kind of demonstrates itself is through us and all the physical stuff out in the world. And it's all this neutral stuff. One substance, not mental, not physical, maybe both. It avoids a lot of the problems that face the dualist. It avoids a lot of the problems that face the physicalist. But it's kind of fluffy and nebulous the way it's explained or the way it's talked about. And so, this is kind of where where Nagel comes in with his book, Why, or Mind and Cosmos. And the subtitle is Why the Materialist, or interchangeably the Physicalist, their conception of nature is almost certainly false. And he tries to bring in Darwin and Neo-Darwinian thought, just the idea that like the ideas of like natural selection and all that. So he tries to rope them in on this. And his aim here is not to say that science is flat out wrong, but that the current naturalistic framework, which he argues to be a very physicalist one, can't explain or can't account for consciousness. He's not satisfied with how we're understanding consciousness. And so that's basically all I had for that. And now, I guess what I'll do is just read a tiny bit of that book that we can talk, like we can go back to, or we can just talk about what theories you guys kind of like more. But I'll go ahead and read you this first, like it's kind of like an excerpt of his book here. So, in Mind and Cosmos, Nagel aims his sights at what he calls the current orthodoxy about the cosmic order. This view being that everything in the universe can be reduced to its physical parts, and that the existence and progression of life should be understood in Darwinian terms. He makes an exceptional claim in this relatively short book, that the material Neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. He thinks this because the Neo-Darwinian view, which he believes to be overwhelmingly popular among scientists and philosophers, fails to adequately account for the mind, consciousness, cognition, and values, aspect central to understanding the cosmos, he claims. The general framing of the argument goes as follows. The emergence of life, consciousness, cognition, values, and other aspects of the mind are inadequately explained by the physical reductionists or material reductionists and Neo-Darwinian thought. These flaws are so great that we ought to seriously question the legitimacy of Neo-Darwinian and reductionist views of nature. Essentially, he leads us to the conclusion that we must reconceive of this natural order of things that we've taken, for granted, so that they better encapsulate non-physical, or what he takes to be non-physical aspects of reality as fundamental properties of the cosmos, not as mere add-ons. What's most striking from this book at the very beginning is that he has a tendency to assume that current orthodoxy flies in the face of common sense. So this physicalist view that we have of the world, or that he takes people to have of the world, flies in the face of common sense. And this is kind of where I started having some issues with his line of arguing, or with his line of reasoning. Many proposals are not reassuring enough. The entire project, understandings of reality under this reductivist view, should be revised if not abandoned. And that's basically like the gist of what he's going through. That's all I had for today. I'm gonna drink some coffee because I'm tired. And then, yeah, that's all I basically had. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming. Any questions or anything that was like unclear or objections? Go ahead and stop that. Or I guess one question for you guys is like, what, and you can just type it in the chat, like what view of reality seems the most like palatable or reasonable? Like, would any of you guys call yourselves like just reductive hardcore physicalists? Everything is physical? I'm pretty undecided on that.
I'd say, at least I am, but it feels depressing to say everything is physical. And I mean, if we try to understand things, usually a more useful approach is through functional analysis, what things are working for. For example, in the example of pain, you said it's more useful for us to understand what pain is through its function rather than what neurotransmitter is working specifically for our species, because there's a more general background, which is the function of pain, which species on Earth need. So, uh, yeah, at least it's more useful to talk about functions rather than things. But I don't think there's other stuff than out of the physical.
Why do you think it's depressing to think that everything is physical? I'm curious.
I'm probably just affected by the movies I've seen all my life. But so I don't think it should be depressing. But the word feels bad.
Yeah, it does.
And functional doesn't feel bad.
It does feel a little bit like bleak, or like that's it. It's like, oh, everything, like all of the phenomenal qualities of life, like love, the feeling of blue, the feeling of the sun on your face, like all of that is just physical stuff. It does, yeah. I can see like how that seems really empty. I'm still undecided on which positions I take. Does anyone reductivism seems to me? Let's see.
I personally feel that you cannot really separate physical, because like whatever is happening in like your brain or mental space, it is still located in a physical space itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you like separate two things? Because if it is anything related to haptics or your skin or any of your senses, you're still feeling it in a personal space.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about things that are haptic independent or like sensory independent? Like trying to think of an example of something that wouldn't be like dependent on like numbers. Like for example, yeah, like thinking about numbers or thinking about math. That doesn't seem to depend on anything other than your mind. Would
Yeah,
you say that?
that's true. But then when I think of maths, I think of a paper and pen, and I need that to solve it. So
Interesting. Yeah, it's like whatever there is, there's like a strong uh, sensory tie
I mean, you
to it.
really need like a very crazy level of knowledge in maths to be like able to visualize everything related to maths just in your brain.
Yeah, and even then, you could argue that it's like visualizing, or that there's some sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
sensory.
yeah. You're like seeing the numbers floating around. It is still some sort of a figure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you said reductivism seems to me to counter the intuitive understanding of experience. Though I may not be able to consistently articulate, experience being physically reducible seems inadequate. Yeah, that's the same. Like that's the same feeling that Nagel has in this book, or what he's like trying to say. It's like conscious experience, the values, the impression of the color red in your eyeballs. Like as much as we try and explain it in physical terms, it never seems to be enough because of how big this experience is to us, how like significant and like marking it is. But I don't think non-reductive physicalists rely on supervenience. Supervenience between the mental and physical would be property dualism, no? Not. How would non-reductive physicalism not rely on supervenience? I'm confused about that.
I don't think supervenience is a dependency relation. So like non-reductive physicalism removes the identity claim. So it means that the physical the mental depends upon the physical.
Mhm.
Supervenience is a dependency relation. It's just change in X is correlated with the change in Y or something like that.
I think there's a necessary change when it comes to supervenience. Like there is, if any physical part changes, then there's a necessary change in the mental part, even if slight. Like in that pointillist painting, if you remove any of the dots, it's a slightly different type of painting, I would think.
I guess maybe what I'm just saying is that supervenience isn't dependency, but non-reductive physicalism relies on dependency. So there's a difference there, if you see what I mean.
Oh, okay, gotcha, yeah. No, that's fair, yeah. Alex O'Connor's red triangle. I haven't. Is that? Do you want to explain his red triangle? I don't know what that is. Also, does anyone know about Alex O'Connor's red triangle? Is it like a thought experiment or example he uses? But yeah, I'm also like a lot of these theories or a lot of these like views or models, they get really, really fuzzy. And they seem to overlap a ton. Like you have to put them almost like on a continuum, because like neutral monism, for example, it holds like a lot of the same assumptions that the property dualist might hold, that there's just like one substance with multiple properties, and then it just becomes hard to like talk about because they're some of them like just share so much that giving them a different term seems off. Let's see. Like theories which just reject the metaphysics. Quietism. What's quietism? I'm not familiar. Oh, okay, yeah. What's
So
quiet?
like the point of like quietism is that you have this sort of subjective experience, but that's sort of just a meaningless concept. So I guess what you're saying is that when we try and set up these theories, they're sort of the lines between the theories are quite blurry and fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sort of just say they're all just meaningless, right? They don't really have any grounding in meaning. So this idea of subjective quality or experience is just meaningless, and we should get rid of it. That's sort of the idea.
Interesting. And do you subscribe to that a little bit?
I don't know. It's a really strong position to hold, so it's tricky to say you adhere to. It's I don't know. I see its virtues definitely.
Yeah. I can see like the pragmatic or practical argument, but I don't know. Like subjective experience seems to what does it mean for something to have meaning? It means for something to mark you or to mark something, like to have an imprint. And quality or subjective experience, they have this for us. So it would be hard for me to square how it.
Well, I'd probably disagree with that definition of meaning. So that would be where it comes.
Yeah, fair. The lack of empirical basis could also affect the decidability. Yeah, I think that's what Nagel that's like kind of what he's going after. He thinks that trying to ground things like value, consciousness, mind in empirical findings is a disingenuous thing. I got this book partly. Bleak information. Huh. I like that. How long is that book?
How long? How many pages, you mean?
How big is it? Yeah.
It's less than 200. It's a collection of papers.
Oh, nice. I'll actually, yeah, I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna go try and find a
Yeah,
pirate version.
I've been seeing a shift from materials to information in regards to saying what's the most fundamental aspect of nature.
Yeah, I love it when is Paul Davies and I haven't seen their names. Are those like physicists or scientists?
Oh, I have no idea.
Huh. I like it when other disciplines try and answer philosophical questions. I think we need a little more interdisciplinary stuff. All right.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, like matter information is conserved, so there are laws of no deleting information, for instance, in quantum mechanics, and that's why they say that there's a paradox regarding black holes, because they are not really people aren't really sure how information is conserved, if something can go beyond the horizon, and that's why they talk about whether Hawking radiation solves it. But yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to make sure information is conserved, because it's a fundamental principle.
Mm-hmm.
So no single bit can ever be erased.
Yeah, never erased. Just yeah, I was thinking exactly about black holes the second you said that. Yeah, it's like only transformed, or at least changed, but never deleted.
And also, technically, no single bit could also ever be created.
Yeah, it always has been.
Yeah, I mean, so from quantum mechanical terms, there's no mechanism that allows any true randomness, besides perhaps collapsing the wave function doing a quantum measurement.
Yeah.
But some would argue that there's no way to add a new bit into the universe, and this collapsing the wave function is just appearances.
It just appears to be random.
Yes, from our subjective experience.
Yeah, I think there was an argument for like I think it was William James and his cosmological argument, where he tried to bring in he tried to make a claim that like quantum phenomena are random, and then yeah, the very quick clapback by like a lot of the other philosophers or scientists was like, no, it's just apparently random. Like there could be other underlying laws that we just aren't familiar with. The panpsychist ultimately has a giant conceptual hoop to leap over. Could it really be the view with the lowest intellectual stake in conversation? Yeah, so I remember asking this question, and I think it was motivated by like the panpsychist thought in a class a long time ago. It's like no one would really deny that a person is conscious, or at least very few people would deny that a person is conscious. Um, then like let's say like a baby or something like that. Like people would probably say, yeah, a baby is conscious to some degree, and then take like really intelligent like chimpanzees or something, like they're pretty conscious to some degree, and you keep going down the line of intelligent like or sentient creatures, and then you finally like get down to the point of like uh, a tree or like a blade of grass or like a flower. And this is where I see some strength in the micropsychist view of panpsychism. It's like at the lowest form, there must be some sort of proto consciousness or proto experience that's shared by all living beings. The jump there for the panpsychist would be to go from like a reproducing organism to like a rock or a stick, and up to there, I think that the panpsychists have a problem. But like going saying that like a tree is conscious, at least like in a very minimal, very proto form, I think that's fine. That doesn't rub me the wrong way. Does that rub any of you guys the wrong way? Or is it counterintuitive? The tree
Fine, conscious. I mean, it's a word, so I guess we should define it to properly answer that.
Well, like maybe, I mean, to me, I think it would be like a degree, like the degree of consciousness that someone can have. So, for example, when you're awake and lucid, you're at like a maximal point of human consciousness. And then maybe like when you're asleep or under the influence of alcohol or like something like that, then you're at a lowered state of consciousness. And then you kind of like keep going down rungs until maybe you're like in a coma and you're at a very minimal state of consciousness. And then you kind of can keep going down different organisms and like their capacities to reason, see, or react to the environment, X, Y, Z. That's how I would kind of understand consciousness in like a degree type of way. Not as like a binary, like you either are conscious or you're unconscious. I think psychology is like left from that since the time of like Freud.
A hydrogen atom isn't conscious, is it? I guess we can agree on that.
I would say no, it's not. Yeah. But like a self-replicating single cell, it's not conscious in the same way we're conscious, but it's minimally conscious because it can perform things like react to environment, self-replicate, things like that. So it's like very minimally proto-conscious, like a. And I don't think any of the panpsychists would say that like a tree is as conscious as a human or has the same degree of consciousness as a human. They're only saying that proto-consciousness or like a very minimal level of consciousness permeates throughout everything. And the saying everything, that one rubs me the wrong way, but saying all of life or all self-replicating organisms, that seems a bit more palatable to me. But yeah, I want to like see if I can find an argument for panpsychism. Let's see. I think I found one. Panpsychism. Yeah, proto-conscious elements is what they say. That, for example, okay, yeah, so one of their arguments that I find convincing is like since I just kind of said like I agree that consciousness is not like a binary thing. If it's not a binary thing, then it didn't emerge spontaneously. It wasn't like 100,000 years ago the first bipedal Homo sapien was like, boom, consciousness, I got it. It was like a gradual increase in it. And that's why I think this proto-consciousness or this minimal consciousness, it makes sense. It makes a little bit of sense since consciousness wasn't just like it happened at one point. It's like emergence all of a sudden. Same thing with like the pointillist painting example in Supervenience. It's not like at one point it became that painting. It's like it slowly became that painting over adding more and more points. It was like in terms of degree as opposed to like all or nothing. But yeah, okay. Well, that was about. Unless anyone else has anything else to add or say, I might just end the recording there.